The air on Serenity Orbital was always a little too still, Yuna thought. It smelled of recycled oxygen and clean metal. She preferred it to Earth, honestly. Out here, things made sense. Systems had rules. You put in a command, and you got a predictable result. Her fingers swiped across her personal datapad, scrolling through a message from her friend, Dr. Eris. Dinner? The message read, "The cafeteria has that horrible meatloaf you pretend to like." A small smile touched Yuna's lips. She was standing in front of a newly installed wall panel in Corridor 7. The panel was a smooth, gray rectangle with a simple touch interface. It was identical to the one in her sleeping quarters. This one was supposed to control the local environmental systems for this section: lights, temperature, and airflow. Her job was to install the latest firmware update. It was simple, mindless work, the kind you could do while thinking about dinner plans. She connected her tool to the panel's port. The update bar filled with a steady blue light. Done. The system prompted her to perform a basic function test. Initiate thermal recalibration, the screen suggested. It was standard. It would run a 30-second diagnostic on the heating elements. On her datapad, another message from Eris popped up. Seriously, the meatloaf is terrifying. Hurry up. Yuna chuckled. Without really looking, her right hand reached out and tapped the glowing thermal recalibration icon on the wall panel. There was no sound, but the air in front of her shimmered, like heat rising from asphalt. A powerful tingling sensation shot through her body, from her scalp to her toes. The sterile gray walls of Corridor 7 vanished. It felt like being sucked through a straw. She stumbled forward, the tingling replaced by a wave of nausea. The quiet was gone, replaced by a deep, metallic hum that vibrated in her bones. The smell changed from clean metal to oil, ozone, and sweat. Yuna blinked, her eyes struggling to adjust. She was not in Corridor 7. She was standing on a vast, busy deck made of gunmetal gray plating. People in dark blue uniforms with armored plates moved with quick purpose. Overhead, harsh white lights glared. A loud voice boomed from a speaker somewhere, talking about drop sequence and combat readiness. She looked down. She was still wearing her soft, gray station sweatshirt and black leggings. Her fuzzy socks were visible in her slip-on shoes. She held only her personal datapad. Everyone had stopped. A dozen pairs of eyes were locked on her. These were not the faces of scientists or engineers. These were soldiers. Their expressions ranged from shock to cold suspicion. "What is this?" A voice cut through the hum. It was a hard, commanding voice. A man strode toward her. He was older, with a stern face and short, black hair streaked with silver. The insignia on his uniform meant nothing to her, but his authority was clear. This was Captain Kim Tae-suk. "Who are you?" he demanded, stopping a few feet from her. His eyes scanned her from head to toe, his disgust evident. "How did you get on my ship?" I was updating a panel," Yuna stammered. Her voice sounded terribly small. "On Serenity Orbital. I just tapped the screen." "A panel?" Captain Kim repeated, his tone flat. He looked past her at a younger officer, whose face was pale. "Specialist Park? Report." The young man, Park Ji-hwan, was staring at a large console. "Sir, the log shows an unscheduled personnel transfer from Serenity, initiated from a Class 2 logistics controller. It was confirmed just seconds ago." "A Class 2? That's a military system. How could a civilian access it?" Kim's gaze snapped back to Yuna. "It wasn't military," Yuna insisted, fear making her voice stronger. "It was an environmental control panel. In Corridor 7. It looked exactly like the one in my room. I was just doing a thermal test." Captain Kim's jaw tightened. He looked at Specialist Park. "Verify." Park's fingers flew over his console. After a moment, his shoulders slumped. "Sir, I've checked the serial code. The manufacturer, they mislabeled an entire batch. They installed quantum relay logistics controllers in civilian stations, marked them as environmental controls. It was a massive labeling error. Her ID was in the system from her work clearance. The tap was interpreted as a voluntary transfer confirmation. A heavy silence fell over the command deck. The only sound was the constant, ominous hum of the ship's engines. Captain Kim closed his eyes for a second, mastering his anger. When he opened them, he looked at Yuna not with malice, but with a cold, grim frustration. You are on the UEDF frigate Valiant. We are on a critical supply and reinforcement mission. We are currently in a drop trajectory for the planetary Warfront on Kryptos. There will be no return trips, no detours. The word Warfront hit Yuna like a physical blow. This was a place from news reports, a place where people died. You will remain on this ship, Captain Kim continued. You are a civilian liability. You will stay out of the way. You will not touch anything. He turned to Specialist Park. Find her an empty storage locker. Give her a data pad with non-sensitive logs to sort. Keep her occupied and away from critical systems. He finally looked back at Yuna. The error was not your fault, but you are here now, and here is where you will stay until this is over. Do you understand? Yuna could only nod, her throat too tight for words. Specialist Park approached her, his expression a mix of pity and apology. Please come with me, he said softly as she followed him off the bustling deck. The reality settled in. One moment she was thinking about terrible meatloaf. The next she was trapped on a warship heading to a planet at war. All because of a single, incorrect button tap. The familiar, predictable rules of her world had just been completely erased. The storage closet was not a room. It was a space between spaces, filled with the smell of old wiring and dust. A thin cot had been shoved against one wall. A single, dim light glowed from the ceiling. This was Lee Yuna's new home. Specialist Park Ji-hwan had given her a data pad. It was filled with thousands of lines of old supply logs. Her job was to sort them by date and check for duplicate entries. It was the kind of work given to a computer or to someone you needed to keep very, very busy. The hum of the ship was different here. It was a deeper vibration, a constant reminder that she was inside a machine of war. Hours passed. She worked. She tried not to think. The door hissed open occasionally. Park would bring her a meal bar and a pouch of water. His smiles were nervous. We'll be at the outpost soon, he said once, as if that was good news. Eventually, the ship's hum changed. It became a grinding roar. Yuna felt her stomach lift. They were entering a planet's atmosphere. Through the metal walls, she could hear muffled shouts and the clang of boots running. Her hands shook. She put the data pad down. The roar stopped, replaced by a heavy silence. Then, a new sound started. It was a distant, rhythmic thumping. Boom, boom, boom. It was not the ship. It was something outside. The door hissed open. Park Ji-hwan stood there. He was now wearing a helmet and his uniform looked bulkier. You need to come to the command center, he said. His face was serious. Why? Captain's orders. It's the safest reinforced place. And you should see. She followed him through narrow, shaking corridors. The thumping was louder here. They entered a large room filled with screens and glowing maps. The air was tense and quiet, full of concentration. On the main screen, Yuna saw a jagged landscape of black rock and red dust. This was Kryptos. In the distance, plumes of smoke rose into a violet sky. The thumping was clearer now. Explosions. Captain Kim Tae-suk stood in the center, his back straight. He did not look at her. Sit there. Do not speak, he said, pointing to a small bench near the back wall. Yuna sat. She watched the screens. She saw the outpost data. It was a collection of domes and towers dug into the side of a mountain. From the rocky plains below, small, fast shapes moved toward it. They were not human. They were mechanical drones, skittering like insects. They fired bright pulses of light. The human defenders fired back with solid bolts of energy from the walls. It looked like a scripted video from a game, but the chatter on the comms was real and urgent. Shield Sector B is down. We need more power to the railguns. They're focusing on the generator complex. Yuna watched the patterns. The human defenses were powerful but slow. They would track a target, fire, and destroy it. But for every drone they hit, 3 more seemed to appear. The enemy moved in swarms. They didn't come in straight lines. They flowed, like water finding cracks. Then, the lights in the command center flickered. A low alarm beeped. "Captain, the main power grid is fluctuating. The enemy fire is causing feedback surges through the secondary systems," an engineer reported, his voice tight. On the screen, Yuna saw a large human gun turret swing to track a group of drones. As it fired, a nearby drone glitched, its movement stuttering for a half-second. Then, when a defensive shield panel flared blue to block an incoming shot, a whole swarm nearby seemed to shudder in unison. Changing direction slightly, a thought, quiet and professional, surfaced in Yuna's mind. Pushed through her fear. She had seen this before. Not with weapons, but on Serenity Orbital. It was an interference pattern. When the station's old water recycler pump turned on, it would cause a flicker in the lights in Room 7. 2 systems on different circuits, interfering because their base rhythms were too similar. She stared at the screen. The enemy swarm moved in a weird sync with the outpost's own energy signatures. Every time a big shield activated, the drones reacted. It was a harmonic echo, a bad design, a feedback loop. Her mouth felt dry. She knew she should stay quiet, but she was a systems architect. She saw a broken system. She stood up from the bench. No one noticed. She took a few hesitant steps toward Park Ji-hwan, who was monitoring communications. She touched his arm. He jumped. "What is it?" he whispered. "The drones," Yuna said, her voice barely audible over the comms noise. "They're reading our shield pulses. Our systems are too regular. The rhythm is giving them a signal. They're using it to stay coordinated. It's causing a feedback in our own grid, too." Park stared at her. "What? How can you know that?" "Look at the secondary monitor, the energy output wave," she said, pointing. "See that spike? Now watch the drone swarm on the main screen. Watch their change in vector. It happens every time. It's a pattern." Park looked. His eyes widened. He saw it. He hesitated for a second, then turned to Captain Kim. "Sir, the civilian. She has an observation." Captain Kim turned. His expression was stormy. "Not now, Specialist." "Sir, she's pointing out a possible feedback loop between our shield frequencies and the enemy swarm coordination. She says it's causing our power instability." The room got quieter. Several officers looked at Yuna in her sweatshirt, then back at their screens. "Are you an expert in alien combat systems?" Captain Kim asked her, his voice cold. "No, sir," Yuna said, "but I am an expert in finding why systems fail. And this," she gestured to the screens, "is a system failure. They are using your rhythm against you. If you break the rhythm, you break their sync." An engineer spoke up. "Sir, if she's right, a full, randomized reset of the shield modulation could disrupt them. But it would mean dropping the shields completely for 15 seconds. 15 seconds is an eternity out there," Kim snapped. He looked at Yuna, then at the screens where Outpost Theta was being slowly eaten away by the swarm. He saw the pattern now, too. The correlation was undeniable. He made a decision. "Do it," he said to the engineer. "Full randomized reset on my mark. Prepare all point defense guns for maximum coverage. They will try to rush us in the window." He looked at Yuna one more time, his gaze unreadable. This had better work. The order was given. Shields dropping in 3 to 1 now. On the screen, the blue glow around the outpost vanished. For a terrible 15 seconds, it looked naked and helpless. The enemy swarm surged forward. And then, it stumbled. The drones, moving in perfect sync a moment before, now seemed confused. Some sped up, some slowed down, some collided. Their fluid, terrifying flow became a chaotic mess. The shields came back up with a new, irregular pulse. The human guns fired into the confused swarm, finding easy targets. In the command center, the tense silence broke. "We have a 60% increase in hits. Their coordination is gone." Captain Kim did not celebrate. He turned slowly from the screen and looked at Lee Yuna, who was still standing by Park's console, looking as surprised as anyone. She had not fired a weapon. She had simply read the rhythm of a broken machine. And she had broken the enemy's rhythm in return. The attack ended. The enemy swarm, its coordination shattered, pulled back into the red dust of Kryptis. Outpost Theta was quiet again, except for the sounds of repairs and the low voices of soldiers. The command center on the Valiant was quiet too. The air felt different. Yuna went back to her storage closet. She expected that to be the end of it. She had given her observation. It had worked. Now she would go back to sorting old logs. But the next morning, Specialist Park Ji-hwan came to get her. His nervous smile was gone, replaced by a look of serious purpose. Captain wants to see you in the planning room. The planning room was a smaller space off the main command center. A round table showed a glowing map of the outpost and the surrounding area. Captain Kim Tae-suk stood over it. He did not look up when she entered. "Sit," he said. She sat. Park stood by the door. "Explain it to me," Captain Kim said, still looking at the map. "Not the technical part. The idea. How did you see it?" Yuna took a breath. She wasn't used to explaining her work to soldiers. On the station, everything is connected. The air system talks to the temperature control. The lights talk to the power grid. If one part has a problem, other parts feel it. You learn to look for echoes, for patterns that don't belong. She pointed at the map. Your weapons and shields are one system. The enemy drones are another. They were talking to each other, but it was a bad conversation. Your shield was shouting a steady beat. Their drones were dancing to it. I just suggested you change the song. Captain Kim was silent for a long moment. He finally looked at her. The cold frustration in his eyes was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. A cautious curiosity. "We have been fighting the Caldarians for months," he said. "We study their tactics. We look for weaknesses in their armor, their weapons. We think in terms of force. You looked at it like a broken pump." "It's what I do," Yuna said quietly. He nodded, almost to himself. He tapped the table. The map zoomed out. "We have other patterns. Patrol routes, supply drops, communication relays. Look at them, not as a soldier. Look at them as a systems architect. Tell me what you see is broken." He was giving her a job, a real one, not sorting old logs. He was asking her to find the cracks. For the next 2 days, Yuna worked. Park gave her access to non-classified schematics and logs. She sat in the corner of the planning room, her data pad glowing. She studied the patrol routes for the scout vehicles. They were perfect. They left at the same time, followed the same path, returned at the same interval. It was efficient. It was also predictable. She looked at the communication network. It was strong with backup relays. But she noticed one relay node, Relay Theta 7, was in a strange place. It was too close to 2 others. Its only job was to repeat signals if the first 2 failed. It sat there, almost useless, but still using power and putting out a steady signal pulse. She saw the pattern of supply drops from the Valiant. They happened after every major attack to replace what was used. It was logical. It was also exactly what the enemy would expect. She made notes. Simple observations. On the 3rd day, Captain Kim called her to the table. "Report," he said. Yuna felt every eye in the room on her. She spoke, keeping her words clear and plain. "The patrols are too regular. A clock could follow them. If the enemy watches for 2 cycles, they know exactly where your scouts will be at any minute. They could set an ambush or avoid them completely." A junior lieutenant, a man with a sharp face, frowned. "We have standard intervals for coverage, and the enemy knows your standards." Yuna interrupted, then bit her lip. She wasn't used to speaking like this. Captain Kim just gestured for her to continue. "The communication network?" She went on. "You have a redundant relay here, Theta 7. She pointed to the map. "It is not doing useful work, but its signal is constant. It is like a lighthouse. If I were the enemy, I might use that steady signal to hide my own communications near it, or to focus an attack on that location to blind you. Now the communications officer looked uneasy. And the supply drops, Yuna finished. They are always after an attack. That is when you are most busy, and when the enemy knows you will have ships coming and going. It is the most obvious time to cause more trouble. The room was silent. The officers looked from her notes to their own maps. What she said was not advanced military theory. It was simple logic. It was the logic of someone who was used to fixing things, not just using them. Captain Kim stared at the map for a full minute. "Make the changes," he said, his voice flat. "Sir?" the patrol lieutenant asked. "Alter all patrol schedules. Add random time variables. Change the routes. Use the algorithm she writes for you." He looked at Yuna. "You can do that?" She nodded. "It's just a timing program. I can make it unpredictable but still efficient." "Do it." "For the comms relay," he said, turning to the communications officer. "Can we turn Theta 7 into a passive receiver only? Kill its outgoing signal unless the other two relays fail." "Yes, sir. It would be a minor adjustment." "Do it. Make it silent." He looked back at the map. "And we will vary our supply drop times. Randomize them within a 12-hour window after engagements." The officers moved to carry out the orders. They glanced at Yuna as they left. The looks were no longer pitying or suspicious. They were thoughtful, assessing. Captain Kim was the last to leave. He paused at the door and looked back at her. She was still standing by the table, looking small in her civilian clothes. "You are not a soldier, Lee Yuna," he said. "Do not try to become one. Just keep looking at our machine. Tell us where it is grinding its own gears." He left. Yuna sat down slowly. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach. But underneath it was a new feeling. It was the feeling she got on Serenity Orbital when a complex problem finally made sense. It was the quiet buzz of a job to do. She was not here to fight. She was here to fix. And for the first time since the incorrect tap, that felt like something she could understand. The changes worked. For 3 days, Outpost Theta operated under its new, irregular rhythms. Patrols came and went on no schedule an enemy could guess. The silent comms relay, Theta 7, stopped broadcasting its steady pulse into the canyons. Supply drops arrived at unexpected hours. The enemy probes that skittered along the edges of the mountains seemed confused, hesitant. They found no patterns to exploit. The command center, Lee Yuna, now had a small station next to Park Ji-hwan. It was just a chair and a data screen, but it was not in the back. She monitored system outputs, looking for new echoes, new signs of interference. The soldiers no longer stared. They nodded. She had become part of the machine she was fixing. Captain Kim Tae-suk still gave orders in his hard voice. But sometimes, just sometimes, he would ask, "Systems check." And his eyes would flick to Yuna. She would give a short report. "Power flow is clean. No rhythmic feedback." He would grunt and turn away. On the 4th day, everything changed. The alarms that sounded were different. They were not the steady beeps of a perimeter breach. They were a shrill, wailing scream. On the main screen, the horizon darkened. It wasn't a storm. It was a wall of drones, thicker and faster than before. Among them were larger, heavier walkers, their armored legs carving into the red rock. "This is it," Captain Kim said, his voice calm but loud enough for everyone to hear. "They have committed. Commander Vrel is throwing everything at us. This is the final assault." The battle was unlike anything Yuna had seen on the screens before. It was not a flow. It was a tidal wave. The human defenders fought with desperate courage. Railgun fire cut through swaths of drones. Explosions lit up the darkening plain. But for every one destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. The Caldarian swarm was adapting, flowing around the strongest defenses, hammering at the weak points. They're bypassing Sector A entirely, heading for the generator complex, Walker on the western ridge. It's targeting our comms array. The command center was a storm of noise and light. Yuna watched her screens, but the data was chaos. There were too many signals, too much interference. The enemy was using jammers. The neat patterns were gone, replaced by a messy, violent crash of systems. Captain Kim was directing fire, his face a mask of concentration. But Yuna could see it. They were being pushed back. The outpost's defenses were designed to handle a smart enemy, not a ruthless, overwhelming force. This was brute strength against brute strength, and the humans were outnumbered. Her eyes scanned the tactical map, not as a soldier, but as an architect looking at a failing network. The enemy formation was a blur of hostile red dots, but she forced herself to look through the blur. She looked for the connections. Every network, no matter how complex, had to talk to itself. The drones had to coordinate. The walkers had to know where to step. An idea began to form. It was a strange, simple idea. It had nothing to do with force. On a secondary screen, she called up an old public file. It was a general scan of Caldarian technology, declassified for civilian research. She had read it during her first boring days in the closet. The Caldarians were proud. Their military tech was advanced, encrypted, and secure. But they considered civilian systems, simple communication protocols, basic data codes, beneath them. They saw it as primitive. Her fingers flew over her screen, pulling up a different program. It was a simple diagnostic tool she used to check signal integrity. It could generate a very basic, generic data packet. A hello signal, the kind used by a million harmless devices across the galaxy. Specialist Park, she said, her voice tight. Park Ji-hwan was relaying damage reports. Not now, Yuna. It's not an attack, she said louder. I need to send a message. He looked at her, confused. To who? To them. She pointed at the swarm of red dots on the main screen. To all of them, on their own emergency command frequency. Captain Kim heard her. He turned, his expression fierce. We are drowning in their comms traffic. What can you possibly say? Nothing, Yuna said. The word hung in the air. She took a breath. I'm not going to say a word. I'm going to send a noise. Garbage. A corrupted, high-priority system sync command. On a loop. Park blinked. A corrupted command? That's not a weapon. That's the point, Yuna said, her mind racing. Their network is decentralized. Strong. But to stay in sync, it needs constant updates from a central source, that relay ship hidden behind the ridge. If we flood them with a command that looks real but is total nonsense, it will spread through their network. It will be a broken file. It will demand their attention. It will cause confusion. It will cause spam, Captain Kim said, his voice low. Yes, Yuna said. It will be spam. In their most important channel. For a long second, the only sound was the wail of alarms and the reports of failing systems. Captain Kim looked from the tactical screen, where the outpost was being slowly eaten away, to Yuna's determined face. He was a man of force, of direct solutions. This was not direct. It was sideways. It was civilian. Can you do it? He asked. I can try. I need access to the main transmitter and their frequency code. Kim gave a sharp nod to Park. Give her what she needs. Route all non-essential comms through secondary. Yuna and Park worked together. He found the enemy's emergency command frequency, pulled from previous intercepts. She built the signal. It wasn't a virus. It wasn't a hack. It was, essentially, a loud, blaring alarm clock that couldn't be turned off, broadcasting static on a channel used for vital orders. Ready? She whispered. Captain Kim looked at the map. Do it. Park tapped the command. Yuna held her breath. On the screen. Nothing happened at first. The swarm kept coming. Then subtle shifts. A group of drones on the eastern flank suddenly broke formation, circling aimlessly. A walker on the ridge paused, took an awkward step backward, then forward again, as if unsure. The corrupted signal was spreading. It was a nonsensical order screaming in the enemy's ears. Sync. Error. Resync. Error. The beautiful, terrible coordination of the Caldarian swarm began to fracture. Drones hesitated. They bumped into each other. Their advance slowed, then stuttered into confusion. Now! Captain Kim roared. "All batteries, focus fire on that relay ship. Its signal is compromised. Hit it." Human targeting systems, freed from the chaos of the adaptive swarm, locked onto the now exposed relay vessel hidden behind the ridge. A concentrated volley of railgun fire tore through the sky. The relay ship exploded in a silent, bright flash on the screen. The effect was instant. The Caldarian assault collapsed. The swarm became a scattering of disconnected, individual units. They were easy targets. The walkers, without central direction, retreated clumsily in the command center. The wail of alarms cut off. An exhausted silence fell. On the screen, the enemy was in full retreat. Captain Kim slowly turned from the screen. He looked at Yuna, who was slumped in her chair, her hands still shaking over her console. She hadn't fired a shot. She hadn't broken a single enemy system. She had simply, quietly, flooded it with nonsense that he didn't smile. But the hard line of his mouth softened, just for a moment. He gave a single, slow nod. It was all the thanks she would get. And for Yuna, it was enough. A week later, Lee Yuna stood in a clean, quiet corridor on Serenity Orbital. The air smelled of recycled oxygen and clean metal. It was the same smell as before, but nothing else was. She was back in her own clothes, simple dark pants and a soft sweater. They felt strange after the stiff, borrowed uniform. The silence was strange too. It was a true silence, not the constant, waiting hum of a warship. The door to the station's small observation lounge hissed open. Inside, a few dozen people had gathered. There were station crew in their blue jumpsuits. There were also several soldiers in the dark blue of the UEDF, standing straight and formal at the back. Captain Kim Tae-suk was there, out of his heavy armor, dressed in a formal service uniform. Specialist Park Ji-hwan stood beside him, offering Yuna a small, genuine smile in the front row. Her friend Dr. Eris beamed, their eyes bright with curiosity and pride. A low podium had been set up. The station's commander, a woman with short gray hair, said a few words about unexpected courage and service. Yuna hardly heard them. Her heart was beating loudly in her ears. Then Captain Kim stepped forward. The room went completely still. He looked older under the comm station lights, the lines on his face deeper. But his voice was clear and strong. "Lee Yuna," he began. "1 week ago you were brought to my ship by a mistake. You were a civilian, a problem I did not want and did not need." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. There was no anger in them now, only respect. "I was wrong. You were not a problem. You were a perspective." He held up a small, dark blue box. He opened it. Inside, on a bed of black velvet, was a medal. It was a simple, sleek disc of metal, etched with a star pattern. A ribbon of blue and silver was attached to it. "This is the Civilian Medal of Valor," Captain Kim said. "It is given for acts of exceptional courage that directly contribute to the success of a military action and the preservation of life." He took the medal from the box. "You did not carry a weapon. You did not fire a shot. Yet your actions directly led to the survival of Outpost Theta and every person in it." He stepped closer. Yuna stood frozen. He pinned the medal carefully to the front of her sweater. It was cool and surprisingly heavy. "You saw the battlefield not as a contest of force, but as a system of connections," he continued, his voice filling the quiet room. "You reminded hardened soldiers that to defeat a machine, sometimes you must not hit it harder. You must understand its rhythm, and then you must change the song." He stepped back and saluted her. It was a sharp, perfect motion. Behind him, every soldier in the room saluted as well. Yuna didn't know what to do. She just stood there, feeling the weight of the medal on her chest. She gave a small, shaky bow of her head. The formal part was over. People began to move, to talk in low voices. The station crew came up to offer congratulations, their faces full of awe. The soldiers nodded to her with new respect. Eris was the first to hug her. "Meatloaf is still terrible," they whispered in her ear. "But I am so proud of you." Finally, the crowd thinned. Captain Kim approached her one last time. Park Ji-hwan was with him. "The Valiant departs in an hour," Captain Kim said. "Our repairs are complete." He extended his hand. Yuna shook it. His grip was firm. "Thank you, Lee Yuna, for your clarity. And for your noise." He almost smiled. Then he turned and walked away, his boots silent on the deck. Park Ji-hwan lingered. "It was an honor to work with you," he said a little shyly. Maybe check your wall panels twice from now on, yes?" She managed a real smile. "I will. Thank you, Ji-hwan." And then she was alone with Eris, standing by the large observation window. The stars hung in the blackness, cold and bright. Somewhere out there was Kryptis. Somewhere out there was the Valiant. "Does it feel different?" Eris asked, looking at the metal on her sweater. Yuna touched the cool metal. She thought about the fear, the overwhelming noise, the blinding confusion of the Warfront. Then she thought about the quiet moment of seeing a pattern in the chaos, the calm of solving a problem. "The galaxy feels louder," she said slowly, "and more complicated." She looked at her reflection in the window, a small woman in simple clothes with a star of metal on her chest. "But I feel the same. I just look for what's broken, and I try to fix it." Eris nodded, understanding. "Dinner? They have actually got something that isn't meatloaf today." Yuna turned her back to the stars. The metal weighed on her, a reminder of a place she never wanted to see again and a thing she had somehow done right. She walked with her friend down the familiar corridor, the silent, predictable systems humming all around her. She was home, but she knew now that the universe was a vast, interconnected machine, full of rhythm and noise, and she knew how to listen. Life on Serenity Orbital returned to its normal rhythm. The air hummed, the lights glowed, the environmental systems cycled with quiet efficiency. Lee Yuna went back to her work as a systems architect. She updated panels, optimized routines, and smoothed out the small, daily wrinkles in the station's mechanical life. But she was different now. People saw it. They saw the quiet woman who moved through the corridors, and they remembered the story. They saw the weight of the metal she never wore in public, kept in its box on a shelf in her small room. When a problem was particularly tricky, a colleague might joke, "Better call Yuna. She fixed a war." It was meant kindly, but it made her feel separate. She had dinner with Dr. Eris often. They talked about station gossip and new research. They did not talk about Kryptis. It was like a dream that belonged to someone else. One afternoon, Yuna was in a lower deck, checking a faulty temperature regulator. She was kneeling by an access panel, her diagnostic tool in hand, when her personal data pad chimed. It was a priority message. The sender code was unfamiliar, but it carried the official prefix of the United Earth Defense Force. She opened it. It was a formal request. Not an order, she was a civilian. An invitation. The UEDF was forming a new advisory group. It was called the Systems Integration and Adaptive Response Unit, the SIAR. Its purpose was to analyze military operations from a non-combat, systemic perspective. To look at battlefields the way one might look at a malfunctioning power grid. They wanted people who were not soldiers, engineers, architects, sociologists, people who thought in terms of connections and patterns. The message mentioned her work at Outpost Theta by name. It stated that her unique approach had provided a tactical solution that traditional analysis had missed. It invited her, Lee Yuna, to apply for a consulting position. It would be part-time, remote. She could live on Serenity. She would review data, nothing classified, and offer her perspective. Her first instinct was to delete it, to close the door on that part of her life forever. The memory of the thumping explosions and the wail of alarms was still cold in her stomach. She finished fixing the temperature regulator. It was a simple job.
Aluo Seguir.
She reconnected it, and the system purred back to its correct function. There was a satisfaction in it. A small, clean fix. That evening, she sat in her room. The metal box was on the shelf. She took it down. She opened it. The star pattern on the metal caught the light. She remembered Captain Kim's words. "You were a perspective." She thought about the Keldarians. Commander Vrel. They were so sure of their strength, their perfect military logic. They had looked at the human defenders and seen only weapons and shields to overcome. They had not seen the quiet woman in the command center who understood interference. That blindness was their weakness. What other blind spots did the military have? What other simple, broken rhythms were they missing because they were only listening for the song of weapons? She looked at the invitation again. It was not a call to war. It was a call to do what she did best. To look at complex, noisy systems and find the point of failure. To prevent things from breaking in the first place. The fear was still there, but underneath it was that old, professional curiosity. The buzz of a problem to solve. A few days later, she was in the station's botanical garden with Eris. Plants from Earth grew here under artificial sunlight. It was always peaceful. "I am thinking of saying yes," Una said, her voice soft. Eris looked up from a fern they were examining. "To the military people? It is not fighting. It is preventive maintenance. But for strategies, not machines." Eris was quiet for a moment. "You are different since you came back. Not in a bad way. You are quieter. But you see more." "I see connections," Una said. "Even here. The water for these plants is cycled from the residential sector. If we have a big water use spike in the evening, the garden's misters delay by 7 minutes. It is a small feedback loop. No one notices, but it is there." Eris smiled. "That is exactly what I mean. You can't stop seeing the system." They touched her arm. "If you think you can help them without losing yourself, you should do it. The universe needs more people who fix things and fewer people who just break them." The next morning, Una composed her reply. She accepted the consulting role. She stated her conditions. Remote work, non-combat data only, a focus on systemic resilience and pattern recognition. The acceptance came back within hours. A new data stream, encrypted and secure, appeared on her pad. It was her first case study. A simulation of a planetary evacuation, bogged down by constant delays. The military analysis focused on ship capacity and enemy blockades. Una opened the files. She ignored the ships and the weapons. She looked at the decision trees, the communication protocols between civilian coordinators and military escorts, the timing of announcements to the population. Within an hour, she saw it. The evacuation orders were sent in a single system-wide burst. It overloaded local networks, causing panic and confusion at the ground level. The solution was not more ships. It was staggered, rolling alerts. It was a traffic flow problem. She wrote her first report. She used simple language. She compared it to releasing too much water into a pipe at once. She suggested a calibrated, timed release. She sent it. A week later, she received a reply. Asterisk recommendation implemented in simulation Omega-7. Efficiency increased by 40%. Awaiting next case study. Asterisk Una sat at her small desk, looking out at the stars. She felt the old, quiet satisfaction of a job done well. The medal was still in its box. The war was far away. But here, in her peaceful room on the quiet station, she was listening to the rhythm of problems again. This time, her goal was not to break an enemy's song, but to make sure the human melody did not trip over its own feet. She was not a soldier. She was a systems architect, and her blueprint was for a universe that, perhaps, could run a little more smoothly. Months passed. The work for the SIAR unit became a quiet part of Una's routine. A few times a week, she would open the secure channel on her datapad. She would study a problem, a logistics snarl, a communication breakdown, a training simulation that kept failing for unclear reasons. She would trace the connections, find the knot, and suggest a way to loosen it. The reports back were always the same. Dry, formal thanks, noting an improvement in efficiency. Felt useful. Felt clean. Then, a new file arrived. It was different. The header read, Incident Report and Request for Consult. First Contact Protocol, The Glimmer. It was not about war. It was about a mistake. The report described a small, sleek alien vessel that had entered the fringe of human space. This technology was unknown. It emitted a peaceful, repeating signal of complex light patterns. A glimmer. A human exploration ship, the Curiosity, had been sent to make first contact. The mission had gone silent for 48 hours, then returned. The crew was unharmed but deeply confused. They reported a complete failure to communicate. Every action they took, every signal they sent, seemed to annoy or confuse the alien vessel, which they had nicknamed the Glimmer. The Glimmer had eventually just left, its light patterns fading into disappointment. The report called it a diplomatic failure. The military analysts were baffled. Their experts in language and xenology had found no meaning in the light patterns. UNA's task was to review the data from the Curiosity systems during the encounter, not the alien signals but the human ones, to look for systemic failures. She spent an evening reviewing the records. She watched the video logs. She saw the captain of the Curiosity trying to be friendly, sending Mathematica primes, offering simple gifts with a robotic arm. She saw the Glimmer's lights flash in agitated, discordant bursts in response that IT was painfully familiar. It was not a language problem. It was a rhythm problem. She isolated the data from the Curiosity's internal systems. She saw the pattern immediately. Whenever the human ship prepared to send a signal or perform an action, its power distribution would fluctuate. Its life support would hiccup. Its gravity field would generate a tiny, almost immeasurable surge. These were normal events on a human ship. The systems were interconnected. Doing one thing always slightly affected another. It was the hum of a living machine. The Glimmer, Una realized, was not listening to their radio messages or looking at their mathematical primes. It was reading their ship. It was interpreting the constant, subtle symphony of the Curiosity system noises as their primary communication. Every time they tried to say hello with a signal, their own ship's background noise was shouting something else entirely. The power surge before a transmission might read as aggression. The life support adjustment might read as fear. The humans were speaking carefully chosen words with their mouths, while their entire body language, the hums, clicks, and surges of their vessel, was sending chaotic, contradictory noise. She wrote her report. It was her shortest one yet. Subject: misaligned communication layers. The alien entity, the Glimmer, does not use a secondary signal, radio, light, as primary communication. It reads the base-level systemic outputs of a vessel as intentional broadcast. Our attempts to communicate via crafted signals were drowned out by the uncontrolled symphony of our own ship's operations. We were shouting one thing with a megaphone while our body screamed another. Recommendation: for next contact, engineer a quiet ship. A vessel where non-essential systems can be fully dampened or put into a holding pattern to create a clean, controlled baseline. Only then introduce simple, deliberate signals that will not be contradicted by background noise. She sent it. She did not expect much. It was a strange idea. The reply came 2 days later. It was not the usual dry note. It was a direct, personal communication from the director of the SIAR unit. Una, your analysis has been forwarded to the First Contact Directorate. It is the only assessment that explains the observed alien behavior. A prototype quiet ship project has been fast-tracked. Your insight may have prevented a conflict born of simple misunderstanding. This is the core of our unit's purpose. Well done. Una read the message 3 times. She thought of the Glimmer, its lights fading in disappointment. She thought of the confused crew of the Curiosity. No one had been evil. No one had wanted a fight. They had just been talking past each other, on different frequencies no one knew to check. That night, she met Eris for dinner in the station's garden. The misters came on, a fine spray that was 7 minutes late, just as she had predicted long ago. You look thoughtful, Eris said. I was thinking about noise, Una said, and how most problems aren't about the message. They're about all the other sounds you can't stop making. Eris nodded slowly, like the hum of a nervous person trying to give a speech. Exactly, Una said. She looked at the plants, thriving in their quiet, artificial world. For so long we have thought that to be strong you must be loud. Your weapons must be big. Your signals must be powerful. But what if true strength is sometimes about being able to be quiet? to listen to the hum of the other guy's ship. She finished her meal. Later, back in her room, she did not open a new case file. Instead, she pulled up the public station schematics for Serenity Orbital. She began sketching not for the military, but for herself. A thought experiment. How would you design a place whose primary purpose was not to do anything but to be neutral? To be a truly quiet room in a noisy universe? What systems would you isolate? What rhythms would you choose to allow? It was not a weapon. It was not a shield. It was an idea, a blueprint for a different kind of strength. And as she worked, Lee Yuna felt the last of the Warfront's cold fear melt away, replaced by the calm, steady purpose of an architect facing a fascinating, endless problem.